everyone. Welcome to the YAM Podcast. My name is Nahal Hakmin. I am the host of this podcast. We are super excited to invite Dr.Christy Matusiak, a holistically driven chiropractic physician who wrote the book called Coordinating the Chaos. All of these will be in the show notes for sure for you to check out all the details. We are super excited to have you on the show because this book is all about motherhood. We haven't yet talked on the show of why it's important for mothers to thrive. And it seems like a really simplistic question. And I almost want to kick myself. The fact that I even have the desire to ask it. Obviously, we need to care for mothers, but it's not what's happening right now. Where are people missing out on the gaps? So please, Dr. Christy, fill us out on the gaps on why do we need to care for women? Or better yet, why did you write this book?
Oh, there's so many answers there. First off, thank you so much for having me. Blessed to meet you and have this experience with you. So first off, to answer your question, why is it important that women and mothers are supported and that they're thriving? It is common sense to me. We always think about the obvious things, right? Like when a woman is going through her prenatal care, she needs to get prenatal care by midwives, physicians of some kind, right? Mm-hmm. To ensure a healthy pregnancy. We always encourage women, don't drink, don't smoke, don't do drugs. Why? Because those substances can harm the fetal development. It can impair cognitive development. It can cause increased risk of mortality rates and lower birth weight. That can lead to all sorts of problems, right? So we admit that all those things can be a problem. Mm-hmm. On the opposite side of the coin, it's just as important, obviously more important, if the woman is taking care of herself through healthy diet, through exercise, through mental, emotional well-being. All those things are going to have the opposite and obviously desired effect on that developing baby. Other things and I touch on this in the book a little bit, the idea of co-sleeping with your infant. A lot of people freak out about that, right? Because, you could roll over on your baby and it's unsafe. There is absolutely a safe way to do that. And your baby is so connected to you that you have that baby on your chest. Your energy, your being is helping regulate that infant's heart rate, breathing patterns. It calms their stress levels and their hormones. That little human's been growing inside of you for 9 months. You can't just cut the cord and then it's just suddenly over. It doesn't work that way. And so the more balanced and more stable that woman and that mother is through all of it, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, hormonally, nutritionally, physically, structurally, all of it, the better off the baby's going to be as a result.
And something you mentioned there was it made me think of how in yoga, it says that even though the baby comes out of the mother and the baby is at the second chakra of the woman, and when it comes out, that is physically still attached to its third chakra, meaning it's the child's willpower center. So it's like when you cut off the cord, even though physically speaking, they're disconnected, but actually it's months after that energetically they're connected. So everything that the mother is going through, the baby is also going through. I had a friend who was doing yoga so often with her firstborn, and she's with my firstborn. I'm so connected. I'm everything I feel, he feels, everything he feels, I feel. And we're just in sync and in tune. And he was 18 at the time when she told me this. She's still having that bond at that young age was so impactful for the relationship moving on. And she's when I was with my second, I already had my first. So I didn't really have that much time. And I also wasn't in the same place where I could get the same support, energetically speaking. And I don't have the same relationship with my second son. I'm not as in tune with him. And there's so many instances also where if the child actually doesn't have a heart rate, that the mother puts them on the baby and the baby's willpower to live gets activated. The mother's creativity center, if it's working, which is the whole reproductive region, then it gives the child the more willingness to want to live on this planet. So if the mother's in the creative flow in the zone, then baby's all right, I'm good. I can live here. I have the willpower. It's so funny that all the things that you mentioned about the drugs, the alcohol and all these things, and you were mentioning it, these are what healthcare professionals say to the mother for their baby. But I'm like, those things are actually also for the mother. That wouldn't be good for them either.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's funny how most providers will talk about all those things. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this.
Mm.
And they miss the boat on telling you what you should do. What are some things to actually support your health in all those different areas? And there's a lot. And of course, the answers are always different for each person, because what fills my cup is going to be different from what fills your cup.
Yes.
It's all about doing your version of self-care to make sure that you're at your most balanced place that you can possibly be. And believe me, I did not have all those answers when I was going through my pregnancies. My second one, especially, we were going through some moves and whatnot. And I remember myself sitting there 7, 8 months pregnant or whatever I was, stressing about stressing, because I was so stressed out. And I knew, I was like, stress is really bad for the baby right now. It's not good for me to be stressing out. And of course, then that's just making it worse. And I know it, but we're all human.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy. That's so funny. That's actually a thing that a lot of the mothers were actually sharing with me about. Mostly it was like with guilt. It's like the more guilty they were, like it kept them stuck and they weren't able to move forward. So tell us a little bit about of the things that women come to you for in your practice. And what are some of the things that you feel like you need to remind women the most? What are like top 3, 5, or like 10 things that are like off the top of your head, of the things that I gotta always make sure to say this because this always comes up. What are some of those things?
The number one response is common sense. And every woman I ever say this to says, yeah, I know. But then I reply, okay, but are you doing it? And the answer is almost always no. Take care of yourself first. Put yourself as first priority. We just don't do it. We just don't do it, Nahal. It drives me crazy. And I was one that, I can't even tell you I do it all the time. So culturally ingrained and been conditioned that as soon as you become a mother, guess what? Your life is not your own anymore. And you now are completely responsible for another human life, and you don't matter. Your needs don't matter. Your passions don't matter. Your wants, your desires, your own intimate relationships with your husband or whoever, right? It's all about the baby and all about the child. You walk into a room, and I'm absolutely guilty of this too. Somebody comes in with a brand new baby. You go, oh my goodness, look at the baby. Oh wait, hi, how are you? We forget, like the mothers become invisible. Yeah. And so number one through 10, I'm not sure if I'm going to have 10 the most common answers for you, but that's just
number one.
Make sure you're taking care of yourself.
Stay on that for the whole, the rest of the podcast, like really, because I feel like something that I have to also talk to my clients is that I have to teach them, I have to spend more time talking about how rather than what. So it's we need to take care of ourselves. We need to do the self-care, but it's more like how. So it's one thing that I actually tell women, I'm like, you need to put it in your calendar the way you put in like your doctor's appointment in the calendar. You need to actually schedule it in there, like not randomly. It's not something that if it happens. And one mother, actually, she was sharing with me her like anger about finding time to do self-care is not the same as when the dad needs to find to do self-care, because he can just go and do it. Whereas when a woman does it, she needs to plan ahead of time. Who's going to are they going to be physically fed? Like how to do and to coordinate a whole bunch of things. Actually, a lot of moms talked about the mental load that comes with motherhood. I don't know if you have anything to say about that. I think so many moms
would. Do.
I do. Love it.
It's been a little bit of a point of contention between my husband and I, because I know he's downstairs, so I don't know if he's listening to any of this. But whenever I bring that up, he's an amazing husband, an amazing father, and he does a lot around the house. Like he's a really good person. And men by nature, I don't know if it's a chromosomal thing or what, they don't have that mental load. It's just something about women that we are the ones that we adopt everything. We're the ones that coordinate any doctor's appointments that the kids have to have. I'm the one who's always looking at the calendar. Okay, picture day is coming up. Would you remember picture day? Not a chance. It's little stupid little things that add up to a whole conglomerate of stuff. Yeah. That's just bouncing around in our brains at any given point in the day. And if at any given point I could take any of those things out and put it on his list and say, hey, can you take care of this for me? And he'd do it.
Yes.
Which is beautiful.
Yes.
And it's just a little annoying, that's another step, as opposed to being a full team where you're sharing that mental load without even talking about it. That's just not human beings work. You need communication to make the relationship work and make the family dynamic function. And so the better communication you have with your spouse, the better off all those things will of course happen. But yeah, mental load is a huge thing. And I talk with most women experience it. I don't think I've ever found one that doesn't.
It's huge. And I think that this is what I've been learning when I learn about like masculine and feminine, like polarities, that like something to allow the juices to flow right. Like for the feminine to be in her feminine and for the masculine to be in his masculine, and something that to feel good. What are some of the things that I've noticed? Even just saying that, like my whole body just relaxed. One of the things was that women are actually like the queen, where she gives orders. She casts the vision to the kingdom. And the men are like the soldiers that go and get it done. They go execute on that vision. And when a woman becomes tired is when she dethrones herself to come down to fight the battles. Sometimes she has to. So it's not about whether or not she can, because we always can. But it's a matter of what is your strength and what do you feel good in? For females to remain on the throne and to not extend your hand even, because this is beneath you, to even go do peasant labor. Not that your husbands are peasants. Okay. I don't want to make anyone think that
that's not on the record.
No, this is not. But I'm talking about even the man feels like within his manhood, he feels pride that he can provide for you. He will go and execute the shit out of what you asked him to do. Like that's where he gets his like, oh yeah, I can do that. And so it's actually sometimes I think if women were more in her queendom, and let's elevate him to a sergeant. Okay. Let's elevate him to her secretary general, meaning that it's the one person that she absolutely needs and trusts to execute like the safety of the kingdom. She loves this sergeant general like to bits. And that's the only person that really can protect her kingdom. So it's like for her to remain in her queendom and never extend her arms out, this is where the woman will feel the best. But what a lot of mothers do, what I've observed, is that they shuffle between staying on their queendom and then getting off and like going down a couple steps to go give orders. Whereas she could have done the same thing sitting on her throne, just casting the vision and being patient and just being in her beingness. And so I was like, women were never meant in a romantic relationship, I believe it, to ever work. I grew up in a religion that talked about the equality of men and women. So equality of men and women is huge, but we don't often talk about equality of men and women between mother and son, husband and wife, husband and daughter, or an employee at work, like what that looks like. And I think the one that is a relationship that's very different between a man and a woman is that you have to care for a child, which the woman has to birth, and a life force. So there's a lot to do with that. And when that happens, the support, the anchor, the provider must be strong, must be like anchored into the ground, must be like a flag, like I conquered this. And so women, what I feel is what we need to do is take a step back. We will feel better. They will also feel more like, ooh, I got this, baby. And if there's something that they're not doing right, you can totally tell them. And they would be like, I got it. Well, not always. Kindly, with kindness. I feel like you went into thought when I went into this ramble, but I want to hear it.
It was really good. I took a note on that because it's the one thing I wrote down that you said that was beautiful was when woman gets tired, she dethrones herself and goes into battle.
Yes.
And I would say so many mothers, myself included for a time, were just in battle all the time. And we get to a point where it's definitely a feminine masculine energy. I 100% agree with that. And I feel that very strongly. And I think we put ourselves into that masculine energy because we feel we have to run it all. We got to run the show. And it's not that our partners don't want to be supportive or they're not being supportive. It's just so much extra pressure. And I know, at least for myself, I just always want to take care of stuff myself. I don't like delegating. Maybe it's a control thing. There's a lot of other stuff there.
People don't talk about how much work it is to delegate. It's a lot. It's like more. It's not only do you need to teach the other person, tell the other person what to do, you also need to teach them the way how it should be done.
That's the funny thing, though. That's why another thing my husband and I have going on is he has a quote. It's either I can ask him to do something or I can tell him how to do it, but not both.
Not both.
Because that's the male mentality is if you ask me to do something, I'm going to nail it. I'm going to take care of it my way. And if you wanted to do it your way, then that's all yours.
Yeah. Yes, I do have this fear when it comes to like future housework sharing, to be like, you know what? No one has even been close to the standard I like to cleaning the house. Even maids like don't even meet my expectations. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to dethrone myself in the future, like for housework and be like, just get it done, Nahal. If you want a like pretty little pristine house, like just go clean it up.
Or they'll end up being a lot of compromise. And I can tell you when that time comes, you're not going to care nearly as much now or then as you do now.
I really think my standards will just like drop low. And I feel like that's what mothers like to say, like my standards have dropped so low. I don't even know if I have them. Yeah.
I have a standard phrase that I go to when someone new comes in the house. I've spent like the last half an hour cleaning up and organizing everything to the best of my abilities before they show up. And then they show up and say, I'm so sorry. My house is such a mess. I haven't had any chance to clean. Even though I've just spent the last half hour, 45 minutes cleaning.
Oh my God.
This is as good as it possibly gets. And it's still not really good enough. So it's my disclaimer.
Oh my gosh. It's so sad that we even need to say that, or we feel the need to say that. Why is it not an understood thing to be like?
I've stopped doing it in the last, honestly, ever since I wrote the book, I've stopped doing it because it's in the conversation we've already had about vulnerability and authenticity. You know what? If you're going to judge me for the state of my house, you're just not going to be my people. That's okay.
Yeah.
I can't care about stupid stuff anymore. It's just not worth our time.
I love that. Like, you're just not my people. That's, I think, something that like so many moms like need to hear is find your people, find people who won't judge you, who know the struggle and are not trying to mask it, because mask the struggle. This is actually a recent conversation I had with one of my clients. They were expressing how embarrassed they were of just breaking down, of feeling the need to be strong all the time, like for other people. And I was like, what is actually the greatest strength is for you to show your weaknesses, because then it gives permission to the other person to show their weaknesses and they feel free in your presence. If you are always just like keeping up this front, like this shield, and there's this wall, you're not in the receivership. Going back to the whole queens dethroning themselves, ultimately it's actually an incapacity of receiving, because you got 2 melons in your hands, that you don't have any empty hands to receive, to be the receptacle that we are. Like we're meant to be. This is where we feel the juiciest, like the most like comfortable, is being in receivership. But we can't do that when we're doing, because that's the opposite energy, right? So, but if it's literally, I feel like I would probably have to stand here in like shock for a really long time before I feel like timing, I get what I want within the right time of that receivership. And that's really what it is. I feel like women are just not patient enough. Like we need to really sit back and relax and adjust our energies for whatever we want to happen. But our energies don't allow it. And it's really frustrating when you're want to be in that receivership and you're not, and you're like just doing all the time. And you're like, do I just let go of everything? Like it's not an easy task, but I know that this is what we must do.
It's a beautiful point and I know I've experienced myself. It's that balance between the doing and the being. And I actually described this to one of my office managers just this past weekend, actually, the idea of balance. So I just thought of this now because we're talking about like the doing and being. It's constant balance. We think of balance like this, that everything is even. That's not actual real life balance. Real life balance is this. It's constantly moving and readjusting and recalibrating what is priority today. Okay. And then maybe tomorrow something else shifts to being priority. And that's what actual real life balance looks like. And it's exhausting.
Yeah.
But when you eventually see it as that and stop judging yourself for how it looks, it ends up getting very liberating. And I can be totally honest. I feel like this is like a lifelong skill.
Yes.
Some days I feel like I got all my shit taken care of and it's all together. Other days, nope, not a chance.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we're all human. I really feel like from my book perspective, that's why I wrote the book, is because I actually wrote it for myself first, wishing that I had a guide like this when I had my first son and I was a mess.
Yes.
To just some kind of guide to walk through and say, hey, I got you. It's okay. All the shit that you're feeling is normal or healthy, but just process through it. You're not alone. And here's some guidance on how to get through it most easily in a holistic kind of fashion.
I was actually thinking, I've always thought that women, or I don't know if it's women or just like humans in general, I feel like, I don't know if it's because I haven't been to Girl Scouts, but I feel like such a loss that I haven't been to Girl Scouts, because I feel like, but a Girl Scouts of life. Like, I feel like there's times where I'm just like, how do I not know this? Or how did no one teach me this? I just feel like there's such a lack of information that you really need, and a lot of information that you don't need. And you don't really know. I'm just like, how did the education system just mess up? But one of the things is just not only like holistic things. I'm not even going to go into talking about how meditation really should be taught at a very young age. Like, that's one of the Girl Scout skills that like I did not learn as a little girl. And I was like, that's exactly what I needed. Like, I needed that so long ago. Another thing is like just even things about motherhood. Like, little girls need to be knowing and equipping themselves about motherhood, so that when they actually get to motherhood, it's not like they're completely taken aback, or that it's such a shock to their system that they've heard it. Like, at this point, me without having a child, I've heard it all. I don't want to say I've heard it all. I've heard a lot. And I'm not going to lie, it's not great. And I'm like, this is really why I'm just like, I need to find a way out of this, because I'm like, some people are struggling through it. And I'm like, I don't want to struggle like they struggle. And there's some things I've learned that really I'm like, okay, that's your problem. That's not all mothers' problems. And some of that is like not asking for help. That's a huge one.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like,
not asking for help is huge. And the other thing I really think is clearing the old stories that we've been conditioned to believe on a subconscious level, that what you just said is true, that we can't do it all, that we somehow, that we can't, that this one's mine, that I can't still be fun and have an enjoyable, exciting life and be a mom at the same time. For a while, I didn't believe that I could have a successful, thriving business and be a mom at the same time. There's all these BS stories, belief systems, BS, that are subconscious, they're embedded in our brain. Sometimes we don't even know that they're there until they become apparent, and we go, wow, okay, that doesn't make sense. If we start to tweeze some of those things apart, we realize we can have it all. Motherhood's not going to look the same for anyone, and it doesn't have to be, nor should it. It's going to look whatever you make it to be. And if we can get rid of the stuff that's invading your subconscious, that's not even yours to begin with.
Talk to us more about this. Let's just spend the rest of the time just talking about this. Let's park in these stories. Let's just park there. What are some other stories that like women need to just stop?
Yeah. Let me back up a second. Neuroemotional technique is what I'm starting to describe here. This is a system that I use in my office. As a chiropractor, I can do all the structural work and all that stuff. The system that I uses muscle testing. If anyone out there is listening has ever had a muscle testing experience, the physician uses an arm or leg. Sometimes it gets specific with muscles. In this particular technique system, we'll just use a simple arm muscle and ask a question, for instance. So for instance, for you, like something that you just brought up, just say a positive statement, like an affirmative statement that says something like, I know that I can be a good mom. And what was the other component of what we were just saying? Like
have a thriving business.
Yeah, I can be a good mom and have a thriving business at the same time. And we test that woman's muscle for a strengthening response. Oh. If she is congruent with that statement, she'll remain strong.
Ooh.
If there's a weakening response, that tells me there's an incongruency. So you, on some level, not necessarily consciously, because believe me, we say things all the time that we're like, no, I absolutely want that to happen. No, I totally believe that.
Yeah.
Your subconscious disagrees.
Yes.
So this is stuff like, I want to say it was Bruce Lipton where I really learned this from. He has a book called Biology of Belief that I learned years ago. And in one of his chapters, he says that the subconscious brain, as we're growing up, there's a window of about 7 years where all we're doing is downloading information from our surroundings, from mom, from dad, from grandma and grandpa, school, early environments. We're learning how mom and dads relate. We're learning what a mom means, what a dad means, what those roles indicate. We're learning and we're piecing together all these things based on nothing. And so if our environment and the people who are influencing us the most, not to put any guilt on anyone, because once again, we are all human. There's no judgment in any of this conversation. But if those individuals who are influencing the kids the most in those formative subconscious downloading years are putting in their preconceptions of what their parents taught them and so on and so forth, you're going to perpetuate cycles you don't necessarily believe in. And then you get to adulthood and you go, okay, where did that belief come from? And you've owned it as your own for 30 years. Then you go back and say, yeah, I don't really want that to be mine. And so we can then go through and figure out when was the first time we believed this, or take it back. What's the hardest part about that? Access a specific emotion that you're struggling with regarding that affirmative statement. Take it to the organ system or meridian in Chinese medicine that correlates with that emotion. Clear it out through the spine. There's just like a whole process through it, and it gets it on such a deep physical, structural, and energetic level that ultimately that person can then get over that belief system that wasn't really theirs in the first place.
Is there anyone that could actually do this at home on their own? Clear out these subconscious beliefs, and what would they need to do that?
Good question. So a lot of it. So if you ever, Bruce Lipton is the person that I would recommend like listening to some of YouTube's on, because he talks a little bit about that, I want to say. And there's actually some other people, and I'm missing their names right now. Part of that is meditative. If you can get truly into a meditative state, alpha brainwaves will allow you to start repatterning some of those things. But I really believe the first step is in the awareness.
Yes.
If you're not aware that it's happening, you can't fix what you're not aware of. And so the first step is really becoming so conscious of your choices, conscious of what irritates you. I've gotten to this point where if my energy becomes off, I go, okay, what happened here? Okay, you made me angry today. Point to anybody, your spouse, your coworker, whoever, someone made you angry today. Back that out. Why did they make you angry today? What is it that they did or said that really made you irritated? Okay. And when you really back it out and you keep asking, why did that bother you? Because X, Y, Z. Then why did that bother you? Ultimately, you back it out enough. It's about you. People in our environment, I really believe, are just a mirror for whatever we've got going on in our own stuff.
Yes.
And if we're self-aware enough, we can see that and then stop pointing the finger at everyone else and realize, hey, when we point the finger at you, we got 3 more pointing back at ourselves, and we're really the ones we got to look at.
Yes. There's this technique that I talk to my clients about where first you got to identify the emotion, because just to put what you said in different language is that the mind cannot let go of what it hasn't identified. You have to name it. And we're not there to, a lot of people run away from this because they don't want to stew in it. And I'm like, we're not going to stew in here at all. We're just naming it to let it go, because the mind can only let go of things that it's identified and put like a name to it, a label to it, or whatever. You have to identify the feeling and then go back to the first time you felt that feeling. So if it was like, this person made me angry today. So when was the first time I felt anger? And you go back to the first memory, and sometimes a few memories pop up, and you can do this, the rest of the exercise with them too. And the third is to come up with a statement of, what did that event make you believe about? What was a belief that you formed from that event? So if it was anger, I got really angry because I actually felt like I'm not worthy, I'm not worth it, or this person doesn't want to play with me because they don't think I'm cool. And then the last exercise is to correct it with your adult mind, looking at that situation. How would you go and tell that little inner child, little girl, little boy of yourself, of what actually happened in the situation? Was it really that the other person didn't think you're worthy, or was it just they were going through their own stuff and you were young and little and no one was there to explain to you what actually had happened? And so you just blamed it on yourself and made it all about you. This is the thing that the mind can do. It's like, for a child, is that they don't have the capacity or complexity of actually blaming someone else for any problem. So anything that happens in their surroundings is like they blame themselves as if they had control about it. If mommy and daddy got a divorce,
it's egocentric.
Yes, it's their fault. That's crazy how it would come up in the muscles though.
Oh, absolutely. The body, that's another book. The body, your body keeps the score. The body keeps the score. It's so impactful. Like, your body will hold on to physical, emotional traumas, and you can do a lot of intellectual, conscious work on letting some of those things go. I know I've had patients for years that have been through therapy on sexual traumas and all sorts of things. And until we let them go out of their body with some of those connections that have been made and been formed, it's only after they do that they can really fully move through it. And we see some really beautiful shifts.
So in integrative yoga therapy, we deal with 5 layers of the body: the physical, the energetic, the mental and emotional, the witness body, and the bliss body. And they say that the root of all diseases is in the mental and emotional body. And so the physical and energetic and mental and emotional can have diseases, but the witness and the bliss cannot. So just going by what you said is very interesting, because the mental and emotional body is where the root of all diseases lies. I actually work a lot with my clients on this layer of the body because it's the fastest and it's the one that like really gets to the root of things. But what you said about like the energetics, because every emotion has an energetic to it. And it's not only do you need to release the seed, the weed in your mind, you need to pluck that weed out, but also all the roots that it was growing in your system, which is like the energetics of that. So that was really poignant that you mentioned that, connecting like the mental and the energetics like together. I think it's definitely, if like we do one and we skip the other, there's things that could come back and be reoccurring. It's like that energy, even without the mind, even without identifying what happened, going with the story and all these things, physiologically, the energy needs to be felt and breathed through. And this is where breath practice like usually comes in a lot, because anytime someone's trying to heal, where people stop healing is when they can't breathe anymore, or when their breathing becomes constricted. Like it becomes too hard to breathe, that they stop, or that they feel like they can't go on anymore, or they'll die. Like literally, that's why like people stop healing, is because they're like, it's too much. Like they literally cannot breathe through that. And this is why like breath practice is like a huge thing in integrative yoga therapy. And just yoga avec moi specifically, is that we actually focus a lot on teaching people how to breathe, because if you learn how to breathe, you can basically overcome any other emotion. You have the skills and the tools. This is like the thing that if you distill it, why we don't heal is like literally because it gets to the point where you can't breathe. Either like you're in love and you can't breathe anymore, and then you're like, oh my God, I need to stop or I'll die. Or I can't handle this, the intensity of this emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And all of yoga in general, it really what it's trying to like harness your vessel in order to be able to withstand energetics, like high energetics, and be able to basically hold more of God. And in order to hold more of God, your vessel needs to be ripened, needs to be tested, and needs to like, you need to push the muscles of your like vessel. Yeah. And breath really does that. Talk to us a little bit about how you use your breath in your practice.
Oh, good question. So,
or do you
say, in practice, I wouldn't say I do very much, not specifically. I do personally on a lot of levels when I do my own meditation. That's one of the biggest things I focus on to get in that state. I will, of course, check it on patients in a brief way to be sure that they're diaphragmatically breathing and they're not shallowly breathing from their chest, because that can create a whole host of problems. It's actually really amazing how many women don't know how to breathe.
Yes.
Like they'll be laying on their back, like the easiest position to just have your abdomen rise and fall, and it doesn't move. Outside of that, that's not my biggest focus, but I love everything that you said as far as like another modality to use to help people get more in their body and stay focused. It's a beautiful thing to start.
Tell us more about chiropractic, because I don't think there's actually chiropractors in China. They're probably called something else, but there's not. Really? I actually don't know what a chiropractor, like what is the training of a chiropractor? Because I think another person that you mentioned that also talks about these alpha delta brainwaves is Dr. Joe Dispenza. And I know he's a chiropractor, and I love him and I listen to him all the time. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited that Christy's a chiropractor. I'm like, I have no idea what they do, but if she does any work like Dr. Joe Dispenza, then it's like amazing. So yeah, how do you guys get trained to begin with? Yeah. And also, what are the different things that you do? So if someone wants to come to you, Dr. Christy, and be like, how could you help them? What if a woman just had a baby and comes to you? What are the different things that you check for? Just as an example.
Got it. So first things first, in our training, we're actually trained very similarly to MDs.
Okay.
Very similarly. And that's something that a lot of people don't know.
Yes.
In standard, at least in America, standard observation and connection with chiropractors is, you're back doctors. If my back hurts, I'll go see you and you'll crack me. That's an average human's conception of what a chiropractor does.
Yes.
And when we all graduate, I think each person will specialize in what they resonate in the most. So there are some chiropractors that, you know what, they like structure. They like just doing spinal manipulations. And that's going to be their focus, and cool, good for them. Other people like myself go down a little bit more of an emotional, nutritional, bigger picture energetic path. And so we do a bunch of more things. But our training before graduation is very similar to MDs. We have all the biochemistry, we'll have neuroanatomy, microbiology, pathology, radiology, like all of the things you'd expect that you could go to your medical doctor for. Chiropractors have training to treat those things in a holistic fashion. And that's what I love doing most. So like to answer your question, like when a woman comes into me, if they've just had a baby, I want to make sure they're hormonally balanced. I want to make sure that they're eating well. I want to make sure that they're moving well, that they're thinking well. If they need any homeopathic remedies to support mastitis or clogged duct or something like that comes up, there's a lot of different things that you can do other than antibiotics. Yes. Your baby has an ear infection. There's a bunch of things we can do with that. Your baby has eczema. There's things we can do with that. This is like where I just love what I do so much, is there's so many modalities and so many tools that we have at our disposal in being in natural healthcare. And there's nothing, and I don't want to sound like I'm bashing Western medicine, because they absolutely have a place. 100%, every form of medicine has a place. My thought process is that side of medicine thrives and excels in acute crisis management. And when anything becomes a bit more chronic, or they just don't know where the root cause is, if they don't have a quick, easy medication or surgery fix, there's not much that we can do for you. And that's the kind of situation where I feel like we can really thrive, is because we look so deep at where is the root cause. Mentally, emotionally speaking, there's root causes, nutritional causes, and so on and so forth. So that's usually where I start with my patients. Believe it or not, let's say you were in my office and you just had a baby. Yeah, I will ask you, what was your mother's pregnancy like with you? Because that gives me insights to know, what were you going through, Mom? when she was,
Mhm.
when you were still just developing, because a lot
Mm.
of those energies that passed from mom into you, you hold some of those things. I've heard stories that you wouldn't believe. Like, I've heard stories of women who said, "Oh yeah, my mom was raped when she was pregnant with me." Like, imagine the trauma that you, as that developing baby, will hold on to your whole life subconsciously, just from
Wow.
that act alone. Like, and
And what
thankfully
would
that's
be
not an
that
everyday kind of
subconscious
story.
belief? It seems silly to ask, but what was like one of the
There's a lot of different things. It's not like just one thing, because any human can take any situation and assign any meaning to it.
yes.
Like, we've all met people who have gone through the utmost despicable level
Mm,
of trauma,
mm,
and yet they're the most positive person you've ever met in your life.
mm.
And we've all met somebody whose life has been pretty darn perfect, and yet they complain about every single thing. And so it just depends on your
Yeah.
own constitution, all those different energetic pieces.
I remember when
Yeah.
when we were talking like offline and you brought this up, it made me think about, oh, after we hung up the phone, I was like thinking like, oh, and this is something I already know, but it brought it up and I processed it again after our conversation. And that was like when you were talking about like when you were conceived, what was the thing? And I was raised always thinking or being told that my parents always wanted a girl. I have two older brothers and I'm the third, I'm the youngest. They always wanted girls. It was because the doctor actually told my mom that both of my brothers were girls. They messed up on the ultrasound. And so they all had pink clothes. So it's like they were waiting for a girl, but I didn't know till literally. So this is the idea that I grew up in my mind that I was like always wanted and I was like waited for and they craved for me and I turned out to be like such a tornado and like chaos because I was the most difficult of their children. My brothers are really like docile and calm and quiet. And my mom didn't even notice she had children until she had me. So I was like, you're welcome. It's like, yeah, it's like a little girl there. But recently, like very recently, within the past year or two, my dad told me, do you know how your mom told me that she got pregnant? I had an exam the next day and she told me that you were pregnant. And she like didn't even consider the amount of stress that I had about doing this thing. And I just had a whole like moment where, oh my gosh. And just so I know how just even a thought like that from my father, like the impact that it could have on my subconscious, like as a fetus, being like, it was not the right timing to tell my dad that. In the end, I turned out to be a girl. I'm his favorite, right? I'm not. I'm like probably the single most challenged to both my parents. And they love it, but it's not comfortable for them. And we both are aware of that. But
discomfort breeds growth.
Yes. And they're like, no, you're here to spiritually grow us for sure. But like the fact that my dad said that and it was incongruent with what I always thought was true, which was that they always wanted a girl, which that part is true. But the moment that my mom tells him that he's pregnant with me, in his mind, he was just so stressed out about like, how am I going to provide for this child? And like possibly thinking, I don't want this child. I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense with the relationships that I've had, or like always feeling like I'm not wanted or I'm not being chosen. I'm not being this. And I was just like, oh, but it's such a like diabolical thing because even in the religion that I grew up in, which is the Baha'i faith, women are given preference. If like the parents have money for one child to go for an education, they send the girl, not the boys, because it's the mother who raises children. And so the money would go to the girls. My parents like had enough money for all of that, for all of us to go to school. But to me specifically, they would always say this because they were like, you need to have a higher education than your brothers do. So expectations on me were greater. But all of this stuff was happening. And I thought I was like the best. I was like, I'm the girl. Yeah, you guys suck. And then you learn recently when you're doing all this trauma work on yourself, then you're like, your dad breaks it down to you the moment your mom tells you that, it's almost like your whole life was a lie of like how they raised you and all the beautiful things that you thought you were like, you had confidence and all these things. And then just like under the rug, it just pulls it. So it's like, it can be very jolting to hear something like that when all of these ideas of yourself and of your future were like stacked on by these beautiful thoughts. But then underneath it, the first moment was actually not such a graceful response.
I can also hear a lot of people, because I know in my past life, before I really got attuned to all this stuff, I would have heard a conversation like this and immediately gone to, I'm just not going to be able to do anything right then, because I could just hear people thinking,
yes,
oh my gosh, every single thing we say, everything we think has potential to impact our babies in a negative way.
Yes.
How are we ever going to do anything? Okay, guess what? You're not meant to. You're right. Everything has potential to impact them in a positive or negative way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Because once again, this is like the cardinal rule of my book is we are humans raising humans. End of story. And all we can do is the best that we can with the knowledge that we have at any given moment. I do not have the same knowledge today that I did when I had my first son 11 and a half years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Do I wish that I did? Hell yeah. I think I screwed him up a little bit. And however I screwed him up individually in that a different way than I screwed up my second son, then I had a different way than I screwed up my third son, are all those screw ups, they're going to make them into their own humans, they're going to have their own characters. And it's okay. Like at the end of the day, you're not doing anything wrong, unless of course you're neglecting or abusing your child or something like that. Of course, obviously outside of those things. But if you're coming from a heart-centered place and you're just doing the best that you can, you're not gonna screw it up. Just do the best you can each day, put one foot in front of the other, go to bed saying, okay, I can try again tomorrow.
I think one of the concepts that I have not shied away from repeating on this podcast is this concept of how in yoga, like your children choose you as their parents. So this is why I always tell parents, like, you need to be authentic, because even if it's authentically like messing up, you need to do that because they chose you for their highest spiritual growth. They did not choose you for them to be comfortable, because growth doesn't happen in comfort.
Yep.
So anytime a mom is, I don't know what to do with the child, I don't know if I'm listening to my intuition or I'm feeling guilty, I'm like, whatever you do, regardless of what you decide, it is correct. I'm like, what are you thinking? That's correct. What do you know? That's correct. And moms, I'm like, dude, you should stop asking other people questions, because nobody held this baby for 9 months and was literally glued in this mother for so long to be so energetically in tune. And so when a mother is like not confident in her intuition, in knowing what to do for her child, this is on like the biggest lie ever. There's no lie that could be bigger than this. It's, if any mother asks you for something, I really think the only reasonable thing to say is a question. What do you think? What is your thought? That's
what's right for you.
And to just always ask the question back to them, mirror the question back to them, that they know what to do, and to share it back with you. That's it. I really think that's where we need to be as like any healthcare professionals, is like really to just go back and just ask the question. So what do you think? And if their answer is like way off, like medical advice, which I doubt that anyone really would say that, but usually I feel like with medical professionals, like they don't listen long enough. They don't actually have the time. It's not, there's logistical things, right? But it's like people don't have enough time to listen to all these things. There's a saying in Chinese medicine, 求医不如求己. 求 means to beg, but to ask. Yi is the doctor. To ask the doctor is not as good as 不如求己 to ask the self. So
Beautiful.
asking the doctor is not as good as asking yourself. So I love it. I love it when a mother like goes and seeks like the doctor's advice. I think everyone needs to do that, right? But like in Chinese medicine, it says it's like asking the doctor is not as good as asking yourself. And I feel like we need to teach mothers more how to just ask yourself.
I think we need to ask doctors or teach doctors to ask their patients that too.
Yeah.
I won't do it every single time. I'll do it when it feels right in whatever moment. But I definitely frequently, after hearing a patient's story, I will go back and say, where do you think this all came from? And sometimes they go, I don't know. That's why I'm here. And other times you'd be surprised they have an answer. I'd be like, they think that's worth exploring. And that's why I use and love muscle testing so much is I will be upfront with everyone and say, I will never pretend to know as much as your body knows about you. You've lived in your body way longer than I ever will. So for me to pretend that I know exactly what supplement you need or exactly what foods you should avoid or eat more of, just from 5 minutes of meeting you, I'm going to ask your body what it thinks. And it's going to give me the answers because I don't know more than your body.
So how do you come up with these questions to ask the body? Is it like a standard question list that you have to ask? Or is it like just it comes intuitively, like in the moment?
A little bit of both. Over the years, I have been practicing now for 12 and a half years. And over that time, there's definitely some things that I check on a regular basis. Every muscle that I check in the body correlates with different organ systems. And so I'm checking the structural integrity of the hips, but at the same time, seeing how your large intestine is functioning, how your kidneys are functioning, how your small intestine and stomach is going, and so forth. And some of those things are standard. And as soon as I find some weakness, I know, okay, I recognize that has to do with this meridian. It has to do with this emotion. And then hearing and tying together their blood work and the other pieces of their history, I can start to piece together the puzzles to really figure out what's the deepest root of what's really going on with this person. And quite frankly, sometimes we're wrong as physicians, right? Like I can do the best that I can piecing all these things together sometimes. And for some people, it works like a charm and they heal really amazingly from whatever they came in with in 2 visits. Others, after a month, 2 months, there's not much progress. And then it's okay. Either I'm missing something or, to your point, what haven't they been honest with themselves about? Ask yourself, you like heal yourself, look deeply on your level to figure out what else really is there. I can't remember if we talked about this. Have you heard of Louise Hay?
Yes.
So
it's like my Bible.
Yeah, I have her book in my desk. So for anyone listening who doesn't know who she is, she was like a pioneer in her field with regard to putting together and connecting metaphysical or mental emotional reasons for the reason we have and manifest physical issues in our bodies. I feel like some of them are really obvious. Some of them have like obvious connections, right? Oh, someone's constipated. What are you holding on to and what aren't you letting go of? If you have a cough that you won't get rid of, what are you trying to get off your chest? If you have an eye issue, what don't you want to see? Some of these things can make obvious correlations. Other things, I've got no idea how she came up with them, but they're usually pretty on. Someone comes in with, I don't know, stomach issues or something like that. And I know stomach issues is nourishment and digesting ideas, right? And sometimes I'll look up whatever they got and I'll look it up in the book and go, I don't know if this resonates with you. And they go, whoa, yeah, how did you know that? I'm like, I don't know. So she's come up with some beautiful connections, and that's sometimes the missing link for people. I have one patient right now, and it's really pretty new so far, but he's had 5 years, I want to say, of GI issues. And he's sought out conservative care through naturopaths, regular Western medicine with GIs, and he's had a couple surgeries. Like he's been through everything. Wow. The only thing that hasn't been really deeply dived into yet is the emotional side of things. Oh, huge. But it's all we got left. And it's a big, important deal.
Yeah. Yeah. But if I think about it, like from a dude would shy away from the emotional stuff.
Depends on the person.
Depends on the person. That's a generalization.
The people who end up in my office, regardless of gender, usually, not always, of course, but usually know what they're getting into by the time they get there.
Yeah. So actually tell me, run me through, if I were to come to you as a client, what would we be doing? Would you be giving me forms? Like, how would you like assess me? Like, run me through the whole process for anyone who I actually don't know. I have seen a chiropractic before, but it was the ones that only adjusted the back. Like for my back injury, it didn't have all this holistic stuff. So if I came to you as a client, how would we start?
It would differ depending on if you were in my office or if we were doing it remotely like this. So just for sake of argument, since you are in China and I'm in the United States, let's pretend I wouldn't actually meet you in person.
Yes.
I wouldn't actually be adjusting you in a physical way because you're not in front of me. So what that would look like is you'd fill out an intake form where it would give me some insights into just some of your past medical history, of course, any specific complaints that you have, a review of systems. So cardiovascularly, digestive speaking, your reproductive health, hormones, all sorts of different, like your skin health, every category of stuff that sometimes you don't even realize you have issues with. And then you look at this form and you go, oh, I had that. And then your one complaint turns into 12. So
the forms are amazing in that sense.
Exactly. We tweak them that way just on purpose. Check on what kind of supplements you take on a regular basis. So we fill all that intake form out. Then we go into a big history where I literally look through that form for maybe 5 minutes. And then I just hear your story. You tell me, what are your priorities? What are your goals with your health? We talk about your diet. Give me a snapshot of what you eat on one average day. What medications and supplements do you take? Tell me about your exercise. And then we go into that whole deeper constitutional history. What was mom's pregnancy like with you? What kind of baby were you? Were you a vaginal birth? Were you breastfed? And any traumas that you went through growing up? Or did you move around a lot? What birth order were you in your family? Like little itty bitty things. And believe me, there are some people who have a very unremarkable history as far as that stuff goes. They're like, no, I had one brother. We got along great. Had a very happy, healthy childhood. Everything was great. I'm like, cool. So one or two things are happening there. Either you had a beautiful, perfect life and I'm really happy for you, or you're just not self-aware enough to know what little things triggered you along your life. And that's okay. You don't have to be self-aware enough to know that in this moment. It'll come out if it's ready. Because in the course of what my treatment will then be, especially if we're remote, I can do some just intuitive, energetic work to do the same kind of stuff that we'll do in person. I'm just not muscle testing you specifically, but I can go through and we'll pretend I'll make things up just for sake of argument here. Okay, so something's coming up within your wood element, that's liver, gallbladder. Those tend to associate with anger, resentment, frustration kinds of emotions. What might you be feeling frustrated about right now? And sometimes they'll go,
everything.
You're right, like work, my spouse, whatever. And then, okay, talk about that for a little bit. What's the hardest thing about that? We pinpoint like what's really at the core of that. And then we take it back. Is this first time that you ever felt this way? Conception to birth to age 10, 10 to 20. Frequently things come up in the birth to age 10 range. That's usually what I would say the most common, because we have a lot of stuff that happens in those first 10 years of life. Like I said, occasionally things come up between conception and birth. And then we have to say, okay, remind me about mom's pregnancy with you. What was going on between your parents at that time? There's so much. And so from that perspective, if you were my patient, like we'd go through all that, play a little bit, and likely bring a lot of things to light to clear from your nervous system's energy. And this is stuff I keep meaning to post. I have a patient who did a video testimonial for me, and she kind of recounted some of her experiences with this because I've just been working with her remotely. Wow. So I'll be posting that on my stuff pretty soon when I can get around to it.
Yay. Dr. Christy has a YouTube channel, guys, by the way, that is amazing that you need to go and subscribe right now. We'll have all the details down below, but I just wanted to say that. Okay. So how many sessions would a person typically need with a chiropractor? So all of what you said, would that be like in an hour or like in an hour or two?
First visit is usually about an hour, maybe a touch over, depending on things. Subsequent visits for me are usually a half hour in length. We can usually, and then once again, it depends on the person. There are definitely some people that I say, I really want an hour with you every time because there's a lot of history, right? Other people, not quite as much. But as far as number of visits, totally varies from the person to person.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone's had experiences with chiropractors before where you go into their office for whatever your ailment is and you're put on the exact same treatment plan, you need to come in 3 times a week for 8 weeks. And then once you're done with that, you come in twice a week for 8 weeks. And then once you're done with that, you come in once a week for 8 weeks. I'm all about wellness and preventive care. It's my jam. I love every second of it. And there's no one size fits all approach. Like, you come in for headaches, your headaches are different than your neighbor's headaches, are different than your husband's headaches, are different than your sister's headaches. And I'm not going to give you a pill for headaches because that's what Western medicine does. Your headaches are unique to you. They could be digestive related. They could be dehydration. They could be something you're eating, or they could be mental, emotionally, or some weird combination of all of it. So,
which is usually what it is.
Exactly.
Humans are complex.
A little bit.
Yeah. I think there's so much like more to explore with like chiropractic medicine. It's really beautiful. I'm tempted to want to seek you out, Dr. Christy.
We'll chat offline.
Yes, we will. So yeah, if you guys want to chat with Dr. Christy, I'm sure she would be not only available to you, but answer your questions. But this episode is going to come out much later than you coming on to the YAM podcast, but I did a YAM membership portal, but I did want everyone on the podcast to know that Dr. Christy would have at this point have already been on our membership portal. And if you want to go check that out, that you can go and get on the membership portal so that you can watch that if you enjoyed this. And all of her details are going to be down below on the blog and in the show notes of the podcast. And so please do check her work out and also subscribe to her YouTube channel, her social medias, and all that jazz. Yeah. And buy her book. Definitely buy her book. Okay. It's so good. It's the Girl Scout's Guide to Motherhood. Really. That's what I think.
I like that.
Thank you so much.
I was never a Girl Scout either.
Yeah. I was like, no. I'm always so sad that no one taught me how to build a fire. I was like, I think that skill is really useful.
It's a totally valuable skill.
Yeah. It makes me, maybe, I don't know if there is one for adults, but I would be down. I would go to it. I would be like,
we could start one.
Yeah, maybe. You know what? Your book basically started one for motherhood. That's like really already where it's at. Yes.
Thanks.
No, really, you did. You know what? Dude, maybe that's what you should call it. Oh my God. Did we just drop a bomb at the end of the YAM podcast? Yes. Creative ideas, man. Oh my gosh, this is great. All right, we'll end the podcast here and we'll see you in the next episode.
On that note,
bye guys.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Christy, for joining us.